Here is a short demo and an overview of the framework that will be presenting at the wxDev conference in May. And so what I'll do is show you the basics of what this is. And when I come across a feature I find interesting, I'll mention that. And of course, first off, we've got our login screen. And we have, as you can see here, you can reset the password and 2FA, two-factor authentication on planes 2 and 3. That's available to us as developers. That's why it's showing here. As a reminder, we can do those things. The 2FA is nice, and we actually use that in two different ways. We use that as a login, so if you need to authenticate your users by sending a code to their email as they log in as the 2FA, it can do that. Or we can also, when they want to change their password, send the 2FA to their email and then come back with the code and enter that in, and they can change their password. Now, the reason I have these buttons up top is I'm tired of typing in my credentials, but let's just go ahead and put that credential in. You'll notice it comes up now with another screen, and that's because in the framework you can belong to multiple groups in here. So I have at the lowest group is a user, then there's an admin user, then there is a WISE technology user. So let me log in as a WISE technology only right now. We'll select that. First thing you'll notice when we come in, and we'll look at that in a little bit, is this. For the table verification, it tells us the following occurred. That column archive, new message, subject, from initials created on, a message was added. That pertains to this table over here because I want to do custom highlighting or row coloring depending on some value. That is available to us in every single window that we have with every single table that uses our CRUD templates. And as you see down here, we have TBL for new, and that's how we get to our highlighting rules. We have new, view, or it would be update and delete. And as I said, this is part of our CRUD templates, and we configure that within the application, and we'll see that shortly, how you can say for a specific database table, I want a user to create them, the record, or modify it, or update it, or delete it. For right now, we'll say yes, and these are the columns that it interrogated over here from this table control. We'll come back to this and I'll show you how we do coloring. Now, as we come into here, you can see that I'm WISE technology only, but I can select and go back in as any kind of role that I have assigned to me. I could go back in as a user so I can be testing how it works. I would say in most instances, almost all instances, you'll have one role for your user, whatever role and whatever you name that and whatever rights you give to that. How these roles work is you have no coding that you have to do to implement this. All you have to do is go select a role, select a table control you want or a table you want to work with from the database, and what kind of access you want for each of the fields. So for right now, we're just going to stay as a WISE technology only. You'll notice that as we do that, we have these menu choices available to us. We can get to the users table, we can get to the registration table, and we can get to application settings. Now, just so you can see the difference, now you won't be doing this going in and out of this usually, maybe just during development, but your user will just be logged in as a user and they'll stay there. But what I want to do is show you what's available to us as a user, right? So if I select user, now you'll notice that this ribbon bar up top has changed. I no longer have the application settings available to me or the registration setting. Now, just a word about that registration setting or table. That is basically our company table because this is SaaS, software as a service, and you can have all your data segregated by the companies that you're working with. And again, you can filter that, and we'll see how to filter that based on what company you as a developer or the admin or however you have that set up are working with. A user would not ever have a choice of that. They just work with the data for the company that they belong to. And again, that registration can be a company, it can be a church, it can be a hospital, it could be a bowling league, it could be whatever you choose it to say and to be as you set up that registration for your SaaS client. Now, what I'll want to do is show you what we see as a user. And again, we have that same message showed up because what it did, it interrogated the table so we can have custom coloring. It only does this once when you come in to the application as the developer. Anytime you come back in subsequently, you won't be greeted with this. However, if you've either added a column, changed a column, or deleted a column, it will let you know that. And how will it do that? When you look at this table here of these listings, you can see these 3 check marks means that column was added. If anyone was changed, it will be a check mark here. If any of them were deleted, it would be selected here. So let's just close this. Now you'll notice this is just a very simple browse that would be showing all the data that this client can look at, or this user can look at. There's no filtering, there's no SAS, there's no QBE, there's nothing. It's just simple. And if you'll notice, we'll take a record and look at it. This is the maintenance form for this, right? And the only code that I have put in here besides what the framework handles is validating the email address to make sure it does not exist for another user. How the login works is instead of a user ID, it uses your email, because I'm thinking there's only one particular or specific email for a user within a company, within a hospital, within a church, whatever that would be. So that's the only code I put in, which is really nice because these are part of our CRUD templates. And depending on what access level you have, if you can't modify a record, the OK will be disabled or be hidden, so the user can't even save anything that they will have changed. And again, you can see that there aren't any required fields in here. So let's just say OK. Let's close this. Now, let's go back in as a wxTechnology only user. And again, you'll notice that the ribbon bar has changed, and this is all based on what access you give the users. Look at the user again. You'll notice that now we have our SAS combo box, so we can select what company I want to work with. And that's because I have said in the setup, and we'll see that momentarily, that I can look at all data. All data means I can select from all of these. So you as the admin for the site, right, for all the SaaS companies that you have, you can go in and look at the specific data. So let's just look at Glenn's company, right, and we do modify. You'll notice that we now have required fields, first name, last name, and I chose a different color for the required fields. We can go and look and see how we assign required fields. You'll also notice that I have what roles I can belong to, and I've selected to be an admin, a wise user, a wxTechnology, or a user. So when I would say OK, and we close this, that's how I get this list here. And again, your users would only have one role, and they can't select any other role that they possibly could select from. They would only have the one. So let's stay as wxTechnology only. Let's go into application settings, and we're going to look at the roles. And we're greeted with that same dialog. So it knows we interrogated all these fields, and so we say yes, let's look at them. Here's the 3 that were added. Say, okay, we'll just close this. If we go to user, and I modify this, you'll see here are all the available tables that we have that we can give a user. So let's say we wanted to be able to have them go to the registration table. If I select registration and move it across, here's the registration table. I now can let them create, read, update, or delete from the specific table. And I can also give them access to the QBE. Not only that, but I can make whatever fields I want required in here. So At this point, all I'm wanting to show you is how easy it is to assign access for a particular table in the database to your user. Let's go ahead and remove this one. Say yes. Let's go look at the users table. And what I'll want to do is I want to make this a required field. So I'll go to business rules and I'm going to say it's required. I'm going to go to the last name and I'm going to make it required. Okay. Now what I want to do is I want to be able to do for the user, and this is just an example, whether it makes sense or not, but it would if you have specific fields you have in mind, that I want to take the address and I want them only to be able to view it, not to update it. So keep that in mind. Address 2, I don't want them to view it or update it. I want to hide that data so they can't see the values. Okay, so we have 2 fields that are required. In fact, actually, I'm going to make a third because I need to make email required. And let's pick a different color and say that's required. Okay, there's the color we want. Say okay. We'll save this. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go in as a user. How would I do that? I'm going to select the user from our multi-role here. And as I said before, your users probably would only have one role, right? So they would not be able to go do multiple things in here. And you can see because I'm a user and I don't have registration turned on, I can't see registration. Let's go to user. Now you'll notice that there's still no SAS here or a QBE, but let's go look at the fields first. Then we'll come back and show you how to turn those on. Okay, here is our required fields for first name, last name. Here is our email that we set as required. You'll also notice that address, remember how I made that read only? Well, you can see the RO for that. And here's the address, number 2, where I said I don't want them to see that data, so we hide that data from them, okay? So we say okay. Now, one last thing that we want to look at as far as this type of access, let's close this. We will go back in as a wxTechnology only. And we will go to application settings, and we'll go to roles, and we'll go to the user again. And what I want to do is I want to go to users and I want to view all records. Okay, so this would show how they can grab from the SAS from the company or whatever companies they have. Now probably you wouldn't have your users do this. I just want to show you how easy it is to turn on. And I want to turn on the QBE. So we'll say okay, we'll close this. We'll go back in as a user, right? So we're switching back and forth between roles. And as I have said, and I want to keep repeating, your users won't be switching back and forth between roles. It's only going to be you as the developer here, or as an admin person who you would give specific rights to of what things they can do within the confines of their company or their church or whatever it happens to be. So if I go to users now you'll notice that we have the SAS control here. I can pick a specific company, right? And so let's pick Glenn's company. Now I can do a QBE on this. So let's look for the QBE where the first name is AA. We find it. There's the record, so you know the filtering works nice. Now, what's really cool about this QBE is there's no coding for you involved on this end. The paradigm that I've chosen for the framework is everything for retrieving data is based on a query. Okay, we'll just keep it at that, real simple. And you notice, and you also know that when you have queries, you have parameters that you can search for on data. Okay, so that's kind of the clue here of how we're able to do the QBE without any coding. So if I close this window, right, or actually let's just go back and look at that record. Here is what we had said before, where they're required, that field's read only, and you wouldn't be able to see any data here if there were some. Okay. Okay, so that's the QBE, and you'll notice these columns, or these rows in here match up to a column that you would have. You see last name, first name, right? And then you got the begins with. So there's some neat filtering in here. All those correspond to what the query is, underlying query to retrieve user data, the users. If I would now, let's change this. Let's go back to wxTech only. Let's go look at registration, right? And so here's the, we'll just close this. Okay. So here's the QBE, and you can see it's got different values. And again, there is not any coding in here to do this. Whether you search on it or how to populate it with the fields that you want to use for searching the data, it's all automatic. Now, the great thing with the framework is it is a nice jumping off place for you to take the framework, start new development, and just add your tables to it, right? And then you would actually take some base forms that we have, and you would change like the values for 6 variables, right, for CRUD, and your IO is completely done for you. You put the fields on that you want to do, you put the columns that you want to show in a table control, the fields on a maintenance form, you're done. Pretty much. I mean, there's always exceptions that you need to code for and what you want to do, but you're done. So you can have your required fields all show up, different colors. You can have the different type of the formatting of the data for read-only, or you're hiding the data. That's all done for you there. Now, as you come in with a specific role, which would be the wxTechnology only, or possibly an admin if you've assigned that to them, they can come in to the generic highlighting rules, right? So that's highlighting for this generic table. And so what we'll do is let's go look at how we do that now. Okay, I have a table here that is used for messaging within the application. And messaging, you know, it could be workflow, it could be whatever you want to do. You're going to, right, create a record and you're going to assign it to somebody. So maybe there's a couple things we need to do here. If we look at this record, let's just view it, right? Here's the data that I have, and I will be expanding on this. We'll be able to have attachments in here when we do specific reports. We probably could include those reports in here, which would make it nice and handy for that. We have an enumerate button. This is just for us as a developer the first time we run this. What it will do is it will go through the form, it will find all the fields and controls that we have. So when we come back in with a business rule, it doesn't have to interrogate this window to see what controls I have. We interrogate them once, we save it in a table, and then my business rules can go against that table to find out what's required. So let's just close this. Okay, so now let's get to the point where we're going to change the coloring of the subject. So if I go back to table, here is my, and now you see it says message inbox highlighting rules. What I want to do is I want to go to subject, right? And I'm going to grab a single value template. Okay, so this is the code that it produces. And so it's gone through and it's declared what your variables are for you, what your columns are from that table, and it's created this code here. So if I were just to compile this at this point, it would say, oh, the following is required. Value is required. So let's go ahead and put in capital A. If I compile this again, it now substitutes that and puts our value here, and it'll say if col subject equals A, then I'm going to color my row a specific color. So for right now, let's just say I want to color it that mustard yellow, right? We'll say, okay. So what it does is it goes back and it compiles it again. It saves it and it will tell you that it's got a successful compile. And the reason I do this is because it's possible that you could be having these highlighting rules that you're working on as a work in progress. And we certainly don't want to have to execute them if they're not compiled properly. So we'll close this, okay? And you'll notice that the A is gone, so it's no longer a column that's been added that you don't know about. So we'll close this. And you go, oh, well, it did not highlight anything for me, and I have an A here. Well, if you remember, we said we wanted it to be a capital A, right? So that's what we have here and down here. But if I change that from equal to approximately equal, and I compile it, you'll notice that it changed here. We'll save it and do OK. Now when I go and look at this, there is our specific highlighting rule that we have. Now, if you've done highlighting before, and I'm sure you have to write that code for every single table that you want to highlight. And there's many ways of writing the code, of how you want to produce or show the colors. And you may also have different clients that have different needs, right? So we'll be expanding on these so you can have like date ranges and those kinds of things. But for right now, if I go back in and let's highlight this, modify it. Okay, now I can give it an else color. So the first column in each one of these color combinations is the highlighting color. The second column is the else color, right? So if it's not equal to A, approximately A, it's going to be the green color. Let's go ahead and say OK. Now you'll notice, right, that we have our else color shown here. In fact, I should have highlighted that. So we know this is two different colors we're working with. So let's just say OK, OK, and close it. All right. Okay, so there now are our two different colors that we have. If it's equal to A, right, approximately equal, it's the mustard color. Otherwise, it's going to be the white on the green. Now, let's go ahead and make a change. So certainly when we discuss the framework in depth, we will go further into how the coding is done for the coloring. And again, what's nice about the framework, great place to start, great place to see how I've done something, and possibly take that code and put it into your own entire applications, not even based on the framework, or take the functionality out and put it in your application. Now, let's go to the rule again, modify. Let's now grab a two-valued template. Okay, so now this is two values. It's going to say if it's greater than equal to a value and it's less than equal to a value. So what I want to do is I'm going to grab cyan for the column color. I'm going to grab the lighter cyan for the else color. So you can see these two here. And what I want to do is I want to look for anything greater than or equal to an A, or anything greater than or equal to, less than or equal to a Z. Now you'll notice that these are the choices that we have. This is all smart enough to know if your operands are going to be specific to strings, numerics, dates, etc. Because with a string, not only can you do equal, but you can do approximately equal. Approximately equal does not work with a number, so we filter those out, and you can only select here what you want. Now, let me compile this and say OK. Let's close it. Again, it compiles. I always make sure we have an accurate reading of whether something compiles successfully or not. Here's our new colors. Close this. Here's our if-else based on a range of greater than something, greater than or equal to something, or less than or equal to something. So, in a nutshell, this is the framework. There's a lot more things that we can do in here. You'll notice there's a dashboard here, which we haven't even touched yet. Go into the explanation of how you use that. There's just some good coding in here, and I'm really liking the coloring. We've taken that from our training materials where we started really simple and expanded upon that. So I hope you enjoyed this. Hope this piques your interest for going to the conference in May. and we will be discussing the framework and how we do various things in there. So hope you enjoyed it.